I made so many mistakes when I was learning how to code, and there are so many things I wish I'd done differently. Today, I'm explaining what those things are so that you guys don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. Hey, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Becca. I'm a full-time software engineer, part-time Pilates instructor, and someone with multiple interests and multiple passions. Mistake number 1 was the tutorial trap. Watching tutorials is fine, as long as you use them in the right way. And I definitely wasn't. And I know this is true for a lot of other junior developers or a lot of people that are just starting to learn to code. There are 2 main issues that I have with watching loads of tutorials. Firstly, watching loads of them can make you feel like you're learning far more than you actually are. You can sometimes feel like you don't need to do the work now because you've watched a tutorial and you feel like you know how it works now. But this isn't how you'll actually get better at coding. If you don't put in the practice yourself, you won't get anywhere. You won't be able to internalize this new information and it won't stick. The best way to learn is by doing. And I definitely didn't do enough practical coding right at the start of my journey. You can't expect to learn to drive a car by just watching someone else drive. Just like you can't expect to actually learn how to code just by watching someone else code. So you need to make sure you're using that new information to write actual lines of code of your own. And now my second issue with following tutorials is this issue of just blindly following along. I used to copy tutorials to a T, literally exactly word for word. I would get those tutorials, follow line by line, and just use it to be able to get my code to run and my applications to work. But this didn't mean that I understood exactly what was going on under the hood. I didn't understand the internal workings of the code. And this is the danger with tutorials. You can just end up copy and pasting things without really staying aware of what you're doing. It can end up becoming a very passive task without actually using your brain. It's much better if you can take what they have done and adapt it slightly. So instead of doing exactly what they have done, maybe figure out how you can tweak little bits. Maybe think about how you can add some extra functionality or adapt it to a different scenario. And this way you'll learn so much more if you can configure it to your use case or something slightly different. Now, mistake number 2 is about documentation. I don't know why, but I had kind of a fear of documentation. I stayed away from it. I thought it was really overwhelming and really tricky to understand, and it was just a bit intimidating for me, to be honest. And I wish I'd got over that fear sooner. Skipping the documentation and just ignoring it can be quite tempting sometimes because you have Google, you have Stack Overflow with some really simple solutions that you can just copy paste and not have to kind of dig deep. But this can end up working against you in the long run because you're not actually, again, understanding how things work. Documentation is typically more comprehensive than anything you'll find on Stack Overflow. It will cover not only that specific question, but it will go into the details and the scope of why and how something works. And then having this extra understanding will help you solve future problems, not only that specific problem at that specific time. And documentation is the most reliable place to work from. It's the most reliable source because it is the single source of truth. You can't guarantee where the information on Stack Overflow has come from. It could be out of date and it can be uploaded by anyone. Official documentation is maintained and created by the owners of that language or that framework. It's the most up-to-date and accurate source of information. And this is not to say that you shouldn't use Stack Overflow or other websites, because I definitely do encourage using it, and it can be a great source of information. But it should supplement, not replace, the official documentation. Understanding how to interpret and navigate the documentation can really elevate your coding skills and can help for future complex tasks. Now, something else that I think slowed down my learning journey was trying to absorb too much information at once. I had this urge to know everything immediately. But when you're first learning to code, even the smallest area can seem quite overwhelming. I found it useful to narrow it down to just the back end at the start and just forget about front end. Focus on the back end, and even more specifically than that, I narrowed it down to focusing on Java. I found I improved so much quicker once I did this because I could just focus on that one thing rather than my brain having to constantly switch between loads of different languages, different concepts, and different skills. Then once I felt a bit more comfortable and felt like I could take on a bit more, I went back and reintroduced some front end. So instead of trying to learn every language, every framework, every tool, every domain, every aspect, just narrow it down to one thing at a time. Maybe focus on one language first and try and master that, or at least master the basics of that before moving on to the next. And this doesn't mean you have to be a pro at that specific language before moving on to a new one, because in reality, you're never going to be completely perfect at something. But you just want to make sure you have the fundamentals and kind of feel comfortable with the core concepts before confusing your mind further with something else. And once you've got one language down, picking up another one feels a lot easier because often things will carry across different languages. The underlying principles are usually the same. When I was first learning how to code, and if I came across different bugs in the code, I would get really frustrated and I would get really stressed out. And this meant I got really flustered and I was less able to think clearly about the code and less able to solve the problems. I didn't realize that encountering bugs and mistakes and things not working out was just the natural part of being a software engineer, and it's pretty much almost a guarantee. It's very rare that things work out perfectly the first time round, and really it's just part of the job. What helped me was shifting my mindset to, instead of dreading bugs, just kind of expecting that they will happen instead. If you start with the assumption that you'll need to debug and you'll need to troubleshoot, it takes some of the pressure off and it will keep you calm. Then if things do work out on the first try, it ends up being a pleasant surprise rather than it just being the norm. Accepting that fixing bugs is just part of the job means that each time you do fix an error, it feels like an accomplishment and it feels like you're moving a step forwards each time rather than it feeling like a setback. My next couple points are around mindset. When I was first starting out, I was always comparing myself to other people, and we all know that comparison is the thief of joy. I didn't study computer science at uni or school or anywhere, and I was always comparing myself to people in my team or people who had studied computer science, people who had way more experience than me, and even those people that just, I think, learnt faster than I did. I found myself measuring my progress against theirs, which just fueled my self-doubt. I was always worried about not being as good as the people around me or the people on my team. And instead of focusing on my own growth, I was getting too hung up on what other people were doing and what they were achieving. But as you can imagine, this got me nowhere. I realised that I'd get a lot further if I just focused on my own daily achievements, no matter how small they might seem. Shifting my focus this way made such a huge difference. Instead of wasting energy on what others are doing, focus it on yourself instead. Focus on the small wins that you have each day, no matter how insignificant they may seem. And another mistake was not asking for help often enough. I was so embarrassed to ask help of those above me, just because I didn't want to seem like a burden, and also because I was so embarrassed to show people my code and just embarrassed to tell them that I didn't know what I was doing. But you're not expected to know everything as a junior, and you're expected to ask for help. You shouldn't feel guilty for needing that help, and you shouldn't feel guilty for asking for that help. Seniors should have some time allocated to be able to help the more junior members of the team. They were probably in your position once, so they know what it feels like as well. And if they're not actually willing to help you, I think that says more about them than it does about you. The more I started to share my code with other people and talk through it and ask for feedback, the more I improved. The more I got that feedback, the more my confidence improved and the better I was at being able to talk about my code. And it was just this constant cycle, this constant positive feedback loop. It led to me wanting to share more, and it led to me learning more as well. Hesitating to ask questions or seek help when you're stuck only slows down your learning further, and it's only going to impact you in the long run. Those people that you think are judging you, it's not going to impact them. They probably couldn't care less about whether you ask a question or not. So if you want to improve for your learning and for your career, you just need to kind of get over that fear. And often people are wanting to help you out way more than you think and way more than you realize. I think that everyone, no matter what level, can learn something from all of these conversations. So you asking a question may actually help someone else realize something they didn't know, or it may help their learning in being able to explain it to you, and vice versa. So don't be afraid to ask for help and have those discussions with people. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got something from this video, and I hope you've learned something from the mistakes that I've made in the past. And hopefully this can help you on your journey to being a better developer. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please give it a like, subscribe, and hopefully see you next time.